was there in the mix as well. And I really felt Vajrachar's loyalty. You know, when you ask someone to be on a team, you know, and then you completely change the parameters umpteen times, and they just, the whole team was like this, and Vajrachar was just there. There was not even a murmur or hesitation. It's like, let's make this work together. So I think Vajrachar has got that loyalty and that great ability to be both completely practical and respond to anything that needs done, but just of huge depth. Like Vajrachar's got such a deep study practice and reflects on the Dharma, and such a deep feeling for Bhante, her teacher, and deep feeling for the Dharma. And it's quite a rare combination to have that, to have all that in one person. With Vajrachara, you get a lot in one person, and I'm so enjoying more and more close interaction with Vajrachara, and delighted that she's going to speak to us on feeling the warm breath of the Dakini, and precepting. So let's welcome Vajrachara.
So thank you very much, Subhadramati, and it's been a real pleasure in my life actually in the last year to work much more closely with Subhadramati. We've often done things together, but it's been a real delight actually. And yeah, great to be with another extrovert. We were talking in our last study group in the Transcendental Principle, we were talking about showing off, and some people think that's a really bad thing, but that message really never got to me. Anyway, there we go. Let's have more people showing off. We've got a lot to show off about. So welcome everyone, and particularly those people also online, which I can't see, but I'm assuming that you're there. Anyway, I'm going to wave to you. So yes, so the camera's there. I'm hoping it's on and they're kind of seeing us, but yeah, so we're joined by, I think it's over 30 people online, and all the people who are with us in the shrine room. So we chose the theme for this Preceptors retreat on the esoteric refuges. And it's funny, it's one of those things where you're sitting around and, you know, you've got your little meeting, and then I think it's Subhadramati said, let's do it on the esoteric refuges. And we all go, yeah, great. And then you sit down and you think, why? And then you think, this is the perfect theme, you know. So in preparation for this retreat, I've been re-listening to all Bhante's talks on the Tantric Path series. And in the first talk, he talks about what the Tantra is. And he says the Tantra represents that aspect of Buddhism which is concerned not with theories, much less still with speculations, not with formal religiosity, not with external piety, but with the direct experience in the depths of one's being of what one truly and essentially is. Not is psychologically, but is metaphysically, transcendentally. And I thought, yes, that's in a way what he's describing there is what we need to evoke as preceptors. It's not about being in a formal religious role. It's not about external piety. I remember once actually Taraka saying to me that piety was the near enemy of the spiritual life. I don't know where she got that, but I very much agree, along with saying being allowed to show off. So yes, so it's about direct experience in the depths of one's being of what one truly and essentially is. And of course, in the precepting relationship, what's essential to us as preceptors is the strength of our going for refuge and meeting the going for refuge in someone else. That direct resonance of going for refuge. And that's what Bhante talks about in terms of ordination. He says it's not an initiation in the sense of handing over energy. It's actually that the intense kind of ritual atmosphere and the whole kind of journey towards ordination stimulates going for refuge, and the strength of our own going for refuge ignites the going for refuge in someone else. So it's not a handing over of energy, it's not a handing over of initiation. It's about a mutual stimulation of going for refuge. And that's what I know, you know, some of you haven't done a private ordination yet. That's my experience of doing a private ordination, is that you go into the kuti, and it's a bit of a strange thing, you know. You enter into the kuti and you go into some sort of timeless realm, and there's a purity in it, and that purity is going for refuge. Of course, other things come in as well. I remember Seela Devi actually, we even started, she leaned over and straightened my kesa. Like that, you know. She just wanted that ritual idea to be correct, and she was right to do that, which I thought was quite funny. Yeah, so apart from all those little things, you know, sometimes one's own sort of like self-consciousness creeps in, but actually the atmosphere is of intensification of going for refuge, because one's stripped down in that kuti to what one truly and essentially is, and what one truly and essentially is a being who's going for refuge. And I don't even think, sometimes there's a language of being a conduit for going for refuge, for something bigger, you know, a conduit for Panti and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I don't think it's even that. I mean, this might be semantics, but I think it's really important that we realise it is our own going for refuge that's been stimulating the going for refuge of someone else. It's not that we're just a passive channel, like an empty tube or an empty pipe. Actually, we've got to be alive to our own going for refuge in order for that ritual intensification going for refuge to take place. And in a way, we've got to be in touch with our own direct experience of going for refuge to the three jewels, and what it means to us and how we express that in our lives. So I think it brings us back to what we are doing as preceptors, and who we think a preceptor is. In a way, what we think the preceptor isn't. So slightly borrowing from Panti's talk on is the guru necessary? The preceptor is not a mother figure. She's not an elder sister. I'm in that one. Sometimes I think particularly joining the movement as a younger person, sometimes people could get in a little role with me as an older sister, and I've never had older sisters, so I found that really confusing. And also I've got my own mother, and she's quite a large figure in my life, and I don't really need another one. So yeah, so we're not a mother, we're not an elder sister, we're not an ecclesiastical superior, we're not an advocate for that mitra. We're not trying to sell that mitra to other order members to prove going for refuge effectively and ready to join the order. And we're not a problem solver for that mitra. So something you might want to talk about in your groups, actually, in a way, what a preceptor isn't, as well as what a preceptor is. I think a preceptor is fundamentally someone who can sit in that kuti, deeply in touch with a direct experience of their own going for refuge that ignites the going for refuge of others. The witness, and you can witness others because you know what it means, you know what being in the order means. And there's a mutual responsiveness of something deep within us that's resonating with that person. Going back to Bhante's definition of the Tantra, we're in touch with what we essentially are in the depths of our being. And we communicate with the mitra from that basis of going for refuge. And then something really quite wonderful can happen when we're communicating with each other from the depths of one's being, from what one truly and essentially is. Something can happen that's quite extraordinary. And in a way, thinking about communication, partly because I've been obviously reading about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is deeply upsetting to happen. And I was thinking, in a way, communication doesn't stand still. We're either going to move that communication in the direction of division and antagonism, or we're moving communication towards what we deeply and truly are, towards that connection with each other as human beings who aspire to more than who they currently are. You know, Bante's vision of cosmic going for refuge, that all beings in a way have a longing to transcend themselves. So we're either moving our communication towards the depths of our being, towards what we truly and deeply are, or we're moving our communication towards division and antagonism, towards separation. One of the things that I often reflect on about communication as well, particularly in the precepting role, is Pante's dream, which he talks about in the realm of the Lotus interviews, and also in a talk he gave in Sheffield about rebirth. But he talks about this dream that he had. I think it might have even been a recurring dream, where there was a great vihara, and it was very public vihara, and people were coming in and out, receiving teachings, meditating, a bit like Adhisthana. You know, there's a lot of quite exciting communication going on, an atmosphere of deepening one's Dharma practice and communication with others. But there was a secret pathway to the back of the vihara, up a mountain, and Bhante ascended this secret pathway and came to this shrine at the top of a hill, which was, well, in a way, it was a kuti. It was a small shrine, a Tibetan-looking shrine with a Hindu rishi who was giving him a non-verbal, initiation, which he said actually it was an initiation. He accessed that initiation from the dream state, but it wasn't just a dream, if you see what I mean. And it asks me the question, that dream makes me think, well, in a way, who's going to be in a vihara with me? And who's going to be in that secret kuti with me? Who's going to be in a secret shrine room in the depths of in the depths of a Buddhist center, who really understands, you know? And I think Bhante looked for this as well, really understands what I understand by going for refuge. It's a very painful search. I think Bhante experienced that as painful sometimes, that people didn't understand him. But in a way, that's what we're looking for as preceptor, looking for who's going to be in that kuti with me, who's going to understand without words what this all means to me, what my going for refuge means to me. And it doesn't always happen like that. It's not like just because someone asks you to be their preceptor, they're immediately going to be able to sit in your secret shrine room with you and undergo non-verbal initiations. But I like to know what I'm aiming for. And maybe it comes in and out of that. You know, maybe sometimes I'm with my preceptees and we're in the vihara together, and sometimes we're in that secret shrine room. You know, in a way, that secret shrine room for me is an image of the kuti. And I know at least I've been there once with them. I know I was there once with him in that private ordination. And I know when it's not happening, you know, I know when we're in neither the vihara or the kuti. Yeah, and I think I find that very painful at Bhante, that when I feel we're not communicating, and we're not really sharing a vision of going for refuge. And in some ways, it's sort of, you know, trying to aim for something that's not quite happening. And I unfortunately have developed this thing where I'm getting immediate feedback about when we're not fully communicating, which is I've started to get headaches when I'm talking to people. I'm quite worried about this, actually. It's like when the communication is blocked in some way, or it's not a real resonance of going for refuge, I'm starting to get a headache, which in a way I've decided in my own strange internal world that this is actually the frustration of the Darkini. The Darkini is showing her frustration at that point. Anyway, I'll talk about a bit more about that later. So we've got the tantric version of the 3 precepts, the esoteric refuges. Sorry, not the precepts, the refuges. We've got the esoteric refuges, and in a way what they are is a call to go deeper in our experience to that essential nature of going for refuge and what it really means to us in our everyday life. So you've got in the Shravakayana, you've got the Buddha as the historical being who rediscovered the way to enlighten and made that path available to others. It should be around. It's in the Tantric Path series. Then you've got the Mahayana conception of the Buddha, which is the spiritual principle of enlightenment, the possibility of enlightenment outside of Siddhartha Gautama. There's this beautiful passage in the survey. We study it every year, which is great, actually. It's one of the real boons at living at Tiyanloka. But there's this lovely passage, I don't know if you remember, from Lama Govinda, where he says that latent within every sphere of consciousness is the potentiality for Buddhahood. I find that so exciting, you know. So it's not just about Siddhartha Gautama rediscovering the way, making it available to others. It's also about this latent potentiality, this potency within every sphere of consciousness that can come to fruition, that there's a principle of enlightenment outside of historical circumstance. And the Mahayana really draws this out with the Buddha of the imagination, the Sambhogakaya Buddha, who's, you know, removed from a historical personage. But in a way, that's all well and good, but we're quite far away from the Buddha, either historically or sometimes even as a spiritual principle. Yes, latent within our sphere of consciousness is the potentiality for Buddhahood, but sometimes there's other potentialities that are being activated at that particular moment. So in our actual experience, the Tantra says that the Buddha is found in the person that we're actually in contact with, that we're actually having communication with, who we're in a vertical relationship with. And they're the ones that give us inspiration and encouragement. So we might not be in contact with a historical Buddha, but we are in contact with our teachers, our preceptors, and our spiritual friends. We're also in contact in some way with Bhante Sangharakshita. Although it's interesting because since he died, in a way, I think he's more moving towards the archetypal guru. It's a bit like there's different levels to Bhante, which I know that Subhuti's talking about recently. And he was talking to me about it, about, you know, there's sometimes that Bhante is a historical personality, you know, a human personality, could be quite difficult sometimes. And, you know, I experienced that to some degree myself when he used to call me in to talk about Mitra convening, which usually meant what he was dissatisfied about the Mitra system. So, you know, you've got that level of communication. And then you've got also Bhante's vast mind. And sometimes you touch in on that as well. And I think that's what the archetypal guru is, that kind of vast mind that we can sometimes catch. I think I definitely catch it listening to the Tantric Path series. I remember when I was, you know, first involved with Buddhism, I was really thinking, well, who is this man, you know? And I listened to all his lectures and I could catch a glimpse. I thought, he knows something. And then I had this dream, actually when I became no, actually it was just before I became a preceptor. Anyway, I had this dream that I was walking down a corridor and there was this room, and I opened the door to this room, and there was Bhante contemplating an enormous lotus made out of light. And I thought, I don't know what that lotus means, not in its true depths, but Bhante does. And so I'm going to kind of cling on to his shirt tails as we wander through these cycles of samsara. That's the feeling I had, you know, when I was listening to those talks as well. There was something in it uncontained. And those Tantric Path series talks, they're evocations. They're not talks, they're evocations. And you can tell he's deeply in touch with something. But yes, that's another talk really, so we'll leave that there. But one of the things he does say in the Tantric Path series is he says one receives through the guru the spiritual influence of the Buddhas. That's quite a tall order. One receives through the guru the spiritual influence of all the Buddhas. So as preceptors, we have to be in touch with our own preceptors and teachers. And in a way, we have to be in touch with the both the Mahayana Buddha, the Buddha of the imagination, and the historical Buddha. We've got to be in touch with the esoteric refuge of the Buddha ourselves, as well as the other levels of who the Buddha really is. So we have to be ourselves in relation to the Buddha refuge. We can't passively let the spiritual influence of all the Buddha's work through us. We have to have the Buddha alive in us as a refuge in order to be communicating from the basis of the Buddha refuge, from going for refuge to the Buddha. That has to be alive within us, however we work it out. Historical Buddha, Mahayana Buddha, the Buddha of the imagination, the Buddha of reality, or through one's own teachers. And then we have the Dharma refuge. So these are the teachings of the Buddha that lead us to enlightenment. In the Shravakayana, the sort of early Buddha refuge, the Dharma refuge, are the teachings that the Buddha explained and that help us along the path. In the Mahayana, that becomes universalized to be the stream of spiritual influence from the Buddha that we are receptive to and that can come down at any time. So there you've got the Buddha eternally preaching from the vulture.
Has it all disappeared for you people or only me?
No, it's gone.
For all of us, I think.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah. Gone.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Let's just talk to each other.
Yeah.
So that's the Mahayana conception of the Dharma. But are we to study all the teachings written down in the suttas or the sutras? There's an enormous body of work there, more being discovered all the time, particularly Mahayana sutras. And can we be in direct contact with a stream of spiritual influence from the Buddha? It can be very, very difficult. So what the Tantra came up with is it sounds like someone just like, a bit bored one afternoon, we'll just come up with a yidam. What the Tantra saw is how to, or in a way what the Tantra was questing towards was the Dharma into form that we can come back to again and again. What's our Dharma that we're really taking to heart, that we're in relationship, that we're spiritually in relationship with, that we're spiritually intimate with? What's the Dharma that we feel that we can eventually become unified with? And that becomes the yidam, the form of the Buddha or Bodhisattva that one takes at ordination and reflects on again. And then we have a direct experience of the Dharma in that. So as part of the private ordination ceremony, we introduce our ordinand to their yidam and sadhana practice, and we're asked to be spiritually intimate with their yidam. They take up a Buddha Bodhisattva figure particularly, but even if they take up just a teaching itself, we're spiritually intimate with that teaching. So with our own teaching, with our own yidam, with our own practice. The sadhana has to be a live art, dense form of the Dharma that we are embodying. So then we come to the Sangha, and in the Shravakayana, in early Buddhism, that's the community of monks or nuns, in the more limited sense, in the more expanded sense. And then in the more limited sense, it's those with transcendental insight. In the Mahayana, that becomes universalized to be all the bodhisattvas and all those who aspire to be bodhisattvas, those for whom the bodhicitta has arisen, and those of us who are sort of alive to those people for whom the bodhicitta has arisen, who are in relationship with them and who aspire to bodhicitta. So it's a much kind of grander version. They're sort of on the path of the bodhisattvayana. But again, the Tantra, are we in contact with the Bodhisattvas? Are we in relation? There's a lot about the kind of Sangha in the abstract, but the Sangha isn't an abstract refuge. The Sangha is about who we actually know. And we need spiritual friends. We need people to take the place of those bodhisattvas, of those with transcendental insight, the Arya Sangha. We've got to have people that we're actually inspired by, who are leading us on the path. Kalyana Mitras, remembering that Kal is from a root which means to urge and inspire and move forwards. So yes, so what's Kalyana? What are the spiritual friends that are urging us and inciting us to grow and develop, who galvanize our energies and inspire us towards the bodhicitta? And this refuge is embodied by the Dharma. We're at home in the sky. Have complete freedom by being a mind. So they've got complete freedom of movement in the mind, in awareness, freedom of movement in awareness. And he compares that to the tremors and thrills of emotion that can arise within the spiritual life on the basis of positive emotion. So that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for the Sangha to be communication between darkanies. Be thrilled. We want to have those tremors of emotion activated. We want to galvanize our energies, awaken our energies, be thrilled with the bodhicitta. That's what we're looking for in communication, is that those emotions arising, those tremors and thrills of emotion to arise. So, of course, that doesn't always happen. And going back to my headaches, so headache one. Headache one is that the person touch with their own energy. They've got dull energy, and for some reason, the fact that they're a bit blocked, so being drained into them. They've got this thing where they ask me up with you, but they've got nothing to say and quite tired, and they're waiting for. And there's this little moment, and in that moment, I feel a growing sense of air, and then I get a headache. They're sort of waiting for me to give them energy, and I'm resistant to do that. So when I say that, I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm just saying that's the beginning of the dynamic. I'm not sparked off. They're not particularly sparked off. And that's not the end of the story. That's where it starts. It doesn't finish there. Okay, so that's where it starts. And, you know, and I've probably done the same to my own teachers. I've probably gone and asked to meet up with them at T-Rat and Loka and, you know, got nothing to say at all, you know. So now I'm receiving the karma viparka from that. So, yeah, so what do we do as a preceptor in that situation? Well, we have to galvanize our own energy. I have to find the emotions that the Darkani represents within myself. I've got to contact the higher, more refined emotional side of my own being. And this is what Bhante talks about in Tony Refuge. He says, well, first of all, the Darkani has to be alive within oneself. One has to be deeply in touch with the higher emotional side of our own being, our own going for refuge, what inspires us. Actually, I'm a bit bored with the word inspire, because I feel like most of the time, yeah, Brandon Joe's nodding. I think it's asking too much in a sort of way. It's more like, I don't think you have to be excited. I think it's more like being with one's own momentum of being towards the three jewels. Sometimes, anyway, I don't quite know that or what that works out in your own being, but there's something to contact that they've got to be kind of like doing their little dance within myself, whatever that dance is. And then it's Darkani that communicates with Darkani. Only the Darkini communicates with Darkini. You know, we've got to be a Darkini in ourselves to excite the dark. So we got that. Interesting is I think that's what the Buddha had to do himself. So I'm going to go back to a story which I often relate. So I'm sorry if you've heard this before, but it's my favourite. So yes, it's in the Samyutta Nikaya. And the Buddha calls out Ananda in what I imagine to be the third watch of the night. I've probably made that up, just to let you know. But anyway, in my mind, I've got reasons for thinking it's dark. So Ananda, he says to Ananda, Ananda, do you approve Sariputta? So Sariputta is not there. He's never going to appear in the story. Totally leading question, because Ananda's not going to turn around and go, actually, no, what? Sariputta's really winding me up, and I'm really glad you asked me. He's not going to say that. This is a conversation that's going only one way, and the Buddha knows it. So he calls out Ananda and he says, you know, what do you approve of Sariputta? And Ananda says, yes, I approve of Sariputta. You'd be mad not to, because he's got deep wisdom, clear wisdom, swift wisdom. And, you know, he's easy to talk to, you know, even about his faults. He's a wise man. And he's very humble. And so the Buddha says, yes, so it is. And the Buddha also starts rejoicing in Sariputta in the same way. So you have Ananda and the Buddha rejoicing in Sariputta's merits. And then something really weird happens, which is that the Susama, one of the gods, sons of the gods, comes with all his friends and lights up the Jeta Grove, I think it's at night, lights up the Jeta Grove in just like the sun on the autumn day. You know, in India, you've got the monsoon, there's heavy clouds all the time, it's very, very dark, it's very damp. You're really longing for the sun to come out. I live in Wales, so I know this feeling. And you're just longing for a glimpse of that ball in the sky, you know. And then it comes out, and it's so bright you can hardly look at it. And he said they illuminate the Jeta Grove like that, like the autumn sun. And they illuminate the Jeta Grove like jewels, kind of brightly coloured, all different, various shining colours in the middle of the night. And they just like gold, you know, like sapphire. Like the morning star, you know, just as the sun is, just as the sort of day is turning, you get a bright star. It's so captivating. And there are these gods, and they're all illuminating the Jeta Grove in these different colours. And Susama says to the Buddha, Sariputta, considered as wise, is without anger, with few desires, is gentle, is a sage adorned by the teacher's praise. And the Blessed One, in reply to Susama, the son of the gods, replies in verse, which I think means singing, actually, or gently chanting. Sariputta, considers as wise, is without anger, with few desires, is gentle and tamed. He awaits the time. So there we have the Buddha wanting to go out in the middle of the night with Ananda just to rejoice in merits. And I think that the sons of the gods, all those different colours, are in a way the inspiration. Well, either you take it literally and they're attracted by the inspiration and the energy that's generated from this conversation, or you take it metaphorically and say that in a way that's the energy arising, the kind of glowing lights arising. And how extraordinary that the Buddha had to do that the Buddha would call out Ananda just to rejoice in merits. There was no purpose to it. Sariputta wasn't informed of this. He wasn't going to make anyone feel better. He just needed to rejoice in merits. I was reading Dilgo Khyentse's autobiography, and he did the same. Apparently, their favourite thing with his disciples was when he had a night off, when they weren't doing anything, he used to call in the disciples, and he used to rejoice in his teacher's merits. And as he did so, apparently he had just tears rolling down his face. And his disciples loved it because they said it was so joyful just to be in that situation. So the Buddha he didn't need to do it, but he obviously did it, that he just had to be in contact with something. He had to rejoice. And I wonder if for him, that was just a kind of contact that, I don't know what goes on for a Buddha, but whether he that just enlivened him in some way. In a way, he was evoking the Darkany, and the Darkany was being evoked. So we have to evoke the Darkany in ourselves in whatever way we do it. You know, basically whatever turn you on, you've got to do it, and we've got to contact that. We've got to feel the warm breath of the Darkany on our shoulder. This is a quote from the Yogi's Joy. I don't know if you remember about the warm breath of the Darkany on our shoulder. Otherwise, Bhante says it's hypercritical posturing. I have no idea what hypercritical posturing actually is, but it doesn't sound good. You know, we don't want that. So how do we evoke the Darkany? Well, that's a challenge, I think, for us all as preceptors, and maybe there's some lessons in the Darkany herself. So the Darkany is naked. We've got Jvalamani's beautiful Darkany here, actually, which is I brought from Tiratnaloka. It's interesting having that Darkany though. Sometimes we can't put it on the shrine because it's too strong. Anyway, but there she is, she's naked. I mean, that's what you first see about the Darkany, she's naked. So with bone ornaments. Sometimes we have to be honest about what's happening for us in our Dharma life. Sometimes we just need to talk about ourselves. That headache 1 scenario. Sometimes I just have to talk about myself, basically. I just talk about my practice or things that are alive for me, or, you know, sometimes possibly they don't want to know about the ancient Bengali text of the Charya Gita that I'm just examining at the moment, but it's waking me up. So, you know, sometimes we have to talk about ourselves, what we've been studying, what we're meditating on, and you know, just to open it up from that point of view. But it's interesting to think, like, why don't we talk about what's going on in ourselves, or where are our limits of where we want to really talk about our practice? And why don't we go further? So I've been experimenting a little bit with that kind of barrier. And I think, well, why don't you want to say that? Is that because actually I think that someone's not going to be that impressed? Or if I communicate my own doubts, that will spark off their doubts? That's a valid question to ask. Recently, where in the lockdown, I started experiencing some very negative, well, sort of, it wasn't that they were negative. Well, basically I started experiencing sort of flashbacks. They weren't, they didn't have a kind of content to them, but they were an emotional state of basically being about 5 years old. And I found that very humiliating, the kind of panic, you know, fear and panic that I felt when I was younger. And I found that extremely humiliating. I thought, I've been practicing for 25 years about being a public preceptor. And basically, I'm going into a mental state when I'm 5 and sitting at the top of the stairs waiting for my mum to come home. And I found that very humiliating. And actually, I had a really good conversation with Parami. I'm hoping Parami's listening, which was, I mean, it sort of saved me in a way. I think sometimes you need a spiritual friend to say, no, you're not going completely bonkers. And it's not because you're not practicing hard enough or something, or it's not the practice isn't working. So I think there's a humiliation, own sort of inner sphere secret, because there's a humiliation that I should be a particular way because I've been practicing for so long. And I've been wondering, well, what can one communicate about that helpfully to people? You know, do I just completely close it off, or do I try and talk about it helpfully? So I don't think honesty means completely offloading negativity and doubt. I think we do have to resolve it to a certain extent before we can talk about it, have some perspective on it before we can talk about it with our preceptees. And in fact, I think talking about it with preceptees or even people at Tiratnaloka draws that perspective out of me, because what I don't want to do is just leave them with a lump of doubt, you know, or a lump of negativity. I don't want to just, you can see it, sometimes you do it, I have done it, you know, where you just leave someone with this big lump of unresolved doubt and negativity, and you can just see the shock on their faces, like, oh, it's horrible, you know. Feeling that, what does that say about the spiritual life, you know? So I don't think it means that. I think it means keeping going with the process of going for refuge and trying to communicate how we're working with things in a way that actually enlivens us to that work and enlivens them, even sometimes get them to help take part in that process in a positive way. And I think that can be really inspiring for people in the midst of their own difficulties. You know, to know that you've had to work through things helps them to work through things. And in a way, their gift to us is that we have to grow. We can't just stay passive with our own lump of doubt. You know, if we've got a lump of doubt and negativity sitting in our lap, you can't keep it like that, because that will communicate to other people. So we have to work on it, and that's their gift to us. And I think it's more than honesty, it's also going back to what's in most essential, ourselves back to the bare bones, essential motivations of going for refuge, to the truth. There's a bit of study that I've given you about how to receive feedback. And what the Buddha says is, he said, you've got to go back to the truth and an even temper. And then funnily enough, I think sometimes like, I've got to go back to the truth and an even temper in communication. And the Darkini is naked, but for the bone ornaments. So she's not entirely naked. She's bursting through a skull garland, and she's wearing bones. So when Bhante talks about bursting through the skull garland, he talks about it as bursting through the vicious circle of self-created and self-induced problems, and leaves them hanging there like a garland of skulls, dead. So we're breaking through the circle of self-created and self-induced problems. And I think what he's saying there, one of the things I've been interested in recently is narratives. We've all got a narrative about ourselves and others. And it's old and it's tired. And I think one of the reasons I sometimes get this headache when I'm talking to people is that basically they're just sinking into their own old narratives. You know, and we all do it, you know, this is not a criticism, but so one of the narratives that I get a lot is, my cooler don't see me, and they don't understand my practice. And I don't need to meditate because it's enough to practice ethics and I can meditate on the bus. And no one takes any interest in me. And it's like, it's so fixed and rehearsed. It's like they're telling this rosary. Interesting, this is a common experience. Anyway, they're telling this rosary, this mala, so there's a Catholic in me. They're telling this mala again and again. Each little bone thing is a story that they created. And you know, and I can see it in myself. I'm not any different. I've got this old story again, like helping me, and I have to take for everything. And like, you know, it's just like I'm telling this mala, like I'm doing this mantra of this old story, and I'm bored and I'm tired of it, quite frankly. And the only thing you can do with it is just burst your head through it. You know, you can't go through each of those little narratives and sort of, you know, oh, that's really sad, you know, poor Vajratara, no one's helping you. You know, there's the little wry laughter from Karen D in the corner there. So yeah, I think, you know, questioning my own narratives, the little stories I'm telling about myself, helps me to have a bit of compassion with other people's narratives, and also a bit of courage. You know, if I've got the courage to question my own narratives, I then have the courage to question other people's, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying not to believe my own stories, and I'm trying not to believe theirs either. You know, even just asking the question, is that true? So no order members ever see you. So when did you last meet up with someone, or when did you last go up? You know, let's look at the reality here. Because yes, we all do it. This is the 4 modes of grasping. The way we construct an identity. We construct an identity by our likes and dislikes, karma. We construct an identity by our views and opinions, ditthi. We construct an identity by our behavior, sila vata, you know, those little routines that we get into. We construct an identity by the roles that we identify with at Vada. We create an identity all the time, a story of ourselves, and it's tired and it's old, and we can be free of it, and we can, what's most importantly, help each other to be free of it with kindness and humor, question each other's stories into the open dimension of blue sky. So the Darkling is naked, she's wearing bone ornament, and she's red, which is the color of love, which Bhante says is more than freedom, it's abandonment, like into the arms of a lover. And I remember my dad saying, he met up with my cousin once. I said, how did that go? He said, your cousin's in love. And he said, and there's nothing more attractive than a woman in love. Didn't mean that in a creepy way. He was just like, I thought, yeah, there is nothing someone in love. They've got their kind of glow about them. There's something compelling about people who are completely abandoned, who are completely in their emotions. And of course, in this context, we mean abandoning ourselves to the Dharma. There's something compelling about someone who's abandoned themselves to the Dharma. And there's a lot of talk about young people and attracting young people. I think personally, what I think young people are attracted to is people who are really living the life, who've really abandoned themselves to the Dharma, in that sort of feeling of love and enjoyment and positive emotion. I remember when we were starting the young people's activities, and Arloka said, well, I don't know why you need all these young order members teaching it, leading these weekends. He said, what would have really attracted me when I was young was a 90-year-old order member sitting in the corner of the shrine room and still doing it, still going for refuge, still in love with the Dharma. That utter, unrivaled, complete abandonment. That's what attracts young people, I think. So yeah, this is a call to feel deeply about the Dharma itself, to feel deeply about the people that we're involved with. And it's fear, there's fear that arises there because in a way oneself is implicated. If we feel deeply for our ordinand, our preceptee, then we're compromised in some ways. We're not safe, we're not accurate. So that's where the darkening arises, in that fear. You can sometimes feel this tangible moment where it stopped becoming you and me over there, and when there's a real depth of feeling. So the darkening is also elusive. Esoteric is another word for guhya, as in secret. You can't grasp after the darkening with the intellect powered by craving, to quote Bhante's definition of literalism. You can't grasp after the darkening with the intellect powered by craving. You can't invite her just because you've read a book about the darkening, or because even you can't even invite the darkening just because you've been made a private preceptor, or someone's asked you to be their preceptor. The darkening comes and goes. One of the things that Pan says is dark is not necessarily one person. The darkening is something that arises within condition that we're sometimes able to access, that we're sometimes able to touch on the darkening with our spiritual friends. So yes, she's elusive. There's a subtle kind of invocation and evocation of the darkening that goes on. Which brings me to headache number 2, which happened on the last retreat. So we're having this discussion, which we often have: do you need to meditate to gain insight? Can I meditate on the train? Is that enough? And I said, well, the kind of clear answer, of course, is, well, you need to be able to get into the first dhyana, because that's where thinking of and thinking about is in operation. So you're able to reflect. So you need to have enough concentration that you're not so full of the hindrances that you can't reflect. So generally it's recommended that you're able to get into the first dhyana. And in this, you know, in the section 1718 of the Transcendental Principle Survey Buddhism, and then, you know, something in me just got this headache coming out, and I thought, oh no, the darkening is disappointed, because it's so lame, that, isn't it, really? Like, you just have to get in the first dhyana so you can think of anything. And I was like, and then I just said, look, do you not want to know what you're capable of? Do you not want to know what the mind is, what's available to you in your consciousness? Do you not want to feel that upwelling of positive emotion and one-pointedness suffusing the body? You know, are you not even curious, like, what beauty is there in the Dharma and in spiritual states, what the potential is of communication and the potential of meditation and the potential of study? Do you not want to know? And I feel like it's just behind my vision that I want to communicate, and I can't communicate it. It reminds me of that Tennyson poem where he says, Ulysses, where he says, yet all experience is an arch wherethrough gleams that untravelled world, whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. You know, I'm trying to say something about what my experience of the Dharma is, that's allowed me to give my whole life to it, you know, that's made me take a solitary retreat every year since I was 20, you know, and sit there kind of grueling away, you know, in some sort of hut in Scotland, you know, because it's love, because there's something there that's waiting, you know, just on the edge of vision, that there's something that appears that's so beautiful, and I can't explain it to you because it's not meditating on a train. Anyway, so I did actually do that rant but it did help my headache, and everyone else looked a bit shocked. But so we need to communicate that depth of feeling, you know, and the survey says, not for our own sake, nor even for the sake of others, should one seek to attain the divine, but simply and solely for its own irresistible sake. That's what meditation is. It's not for our own sake or even for the sake of others. It's one's own for its own irresistible sake. Ooh. Anyway, there we go. Its own irresistible sake. It's the divine. It's wonderful. My goodness, so much is waiting for us all. So yes, it's something so beautiful and profound and beyond the reach of reasoning, just beyond, elusive, you know, nisprapancha, ineffable. We can't prapanchize about it. I want to prapanchize about everything. I've got a theory for everything. Anyway, and letting go of those theories, that prapancha is bliss. So the darkening is bliss. She holds a skull cup, which is spiritual death, and within the skull cup is the nectar of bliss. And Bhante says, well, that's because when we realize shunyata is the objective pole of the experience. We divide the spiritual experience between subject and object because that's how our mind works. And he says, understanding the spiritual experience as shunyata, as insight as shunyata, is one end of the pole. But actually the subjective pole is experience as bliss. So bliss and shunyata are one experience. They're not two. They're just looking at the same experience from the objective and the subjective pole. And I think we can touch on that in communication, that when we let go of our narratives about ourselves and others, we create a space and an openness. We create something that's kind of alive, guhya, nisprapancha. And in that space can emerge this vital mutual responsiveness. The way that Bhante talks about the potential of communication. It's interesting to note, he doesn't just say vital mutual responsiveness. He says it's also based on common ideals and principles. So there's shared Dharma, shared understanding of the Dharma. That's a vital mutual responsiveness based on common ideals and principles, but sometimes beyond words, sometimes without having to use words. And that's what really goes in the secret initiation of the Kuti. So yes, I think we have to be in touch with the bliss of the Dharma to communicate that bliss in a way. There's got to be part of us. I think there's part of me that is always in that kuti behind the vihara, you know, in that Tibetan shrine room, in touch with something all the time. There's this beautiful verse from the Therigatha, Sisu Pachula, who's Sariputta's sister, who said, where she starts off, she says, a nun who has self-possession. Self-possession really means the control over one. It's from a root which control over all one's faculties. None who has self-possession and integrity, sila, will find the path of peace, that ever-welling elixir of life. So none who has self-possession and integrity will find the path of peace, that ever-welling elixir of life. And that's the Dharma. It's a path to peace. It's an ever-welling elixir of life that we can be constantly in touch with on some level of our beings, and that's blissful. And that then gets expressed through our speech. So the speech precepts are beautiful. I know Subhadramati is going to talk about the speech precepts. You know, just going back to the 10 pillars, and Bhante says, you know, truthful speech is like a pearl. We dive deep into the ocean, and there's this beautiful pearl, which is the real truth, not just factually correct information, the real truth. We have to dive deep to get it. And kindly speech is like amber. You rub it and it gets warm and it's capable of attracting other bodies. And meaningful speech is like silver. It can be worked into beautiful ornaments. It can be shaped, you know, you start off with something a little bit unpromising in Vajratara with a headache, and then you can shape it into something quite extraordinary. And harmonious speech is like opal, bringing together all different people to a harmonious and beautiful whole. So yes, the speech precepts are beautiful. And it's interesting with the Darkini, because the Darkini doesn't actually use normal language. Sometimes she does, but she has her own language, you know, that's revealed language. She uses language to subvert the rational mind and imposed order of language. So that's where you get these stories of these tertons who have dreams and visions and are able to speak the Darkini language. The Darkini language is revealed. I've seen some papers actually of Dilgo Khyentse writing down some Darkini language. Yeah, I couldn't read it, sorry. So it's ambiguous language, and the Darkini leads the terma, leads the practitioner even to a secret place, to where the treasure is revealed, where the terma, where the text that's been hidden is revealed, and then helps the terton make that expressible into language that other people can understand. I think there's quite a strong image there, you know, the Darkini, the spiritual friend, takes you to the secret treasure, which is then revealed and made available to others. And in a way, I've heard ordination itself being compared to the terma. You know, it's a buried treasure. It comes out over time, slowly, mysteriously, beyond words. There's an experience there that's laid down in that kuti that takes years to unravel. So yes, we stand on the brink of otherness in communication. You know, there's a moment of dissonance. There's a moment of separation. And that's what makes communicating so exciting and stimulating. We've got a choice. We either stay in separation, we either settle into our own sphere, or we abandon ourselves to the sheer wonder of another human being. We let go of our narrative. We have the choice to let go of our narratives and self-construction and listen to the rattle of the Darkini's bone ornaments, feel her warm breath and the bliss. And the bliss. And that's what precepting is. It's not about getting people ordained. It's about sitting together in silence in a secret shrine room at the back of the vihara, up the forest path, where the initiation is always taking place. And if we're not in contact with that secret shrine room, then the order is just going to be the vihara. I think that would be a shame. You know, it will just be the vihara, it will be the public kind of sphere. And in a way, it will kind of die. Something about it will die. You know, I think it's the kuti that powers the vihara. So that's the kind of vision, and the rest of this retreat will also be looking at very, very kind of concrete ways of how to explore communication. It's very difficult communication, very hard and multifaceted. So we're going to have other talks. We're going to have talks about speech precepts. We're going to have talks about giving and receiving feedback. We're going to have talks about the Nisaya period and how to discuss people. And hopefully through that, we'll start evoking the Darkini, and maybe she'll teach us what precepting is and what the potential of precepting really is.
Thank you very, very much, Vajratar. I just, wonderful talk. Just in a way, a setting of the scene for a whole retreat, a sort of really calling us to action, actually. I love that only the Darkini can talk to the Darkini. And yeah, when you said that question, which was very good for us, about what are our limits of talking about our own practice, I felt like within the talk itself, you took yourself to those limits and took yourself beyond them. So I really, really enjoyed that about your talk. So thank you very, very much. Good. So we are going to now go and have a little break. On the program it says come back at 11:50, but let's come back 4:12 because it's already 20 to 12. So come back 4:12, and then I'll lead us in the bodhicitta practice.